I made your tea, just how you like it.
He smiled, slipping his tie over his head. Thanks, sweetheart.
I watched him sip it. 2 sugars, no lemon. Same as always. He seemed lighter lately, affectionate, attentive, even gentle. Last night, he'd held my face in his hands and whispered, "I just want us again." And I wanted to believe him so badly. After he left for work, I tidied the kitchen. That's when I found it, a hotel receipt tucked behind the toaster. Room service, wine, dinner for 2 nights ago. His name was listed as the guest, but the signature on the receipt wasn't mine, just an initial, B. I froze. Not because I was ready to accuse him, I wasn't. Not because I was sure, but because something quiet and deep inside me had already started to pull away. I placed the receipt back, smoothed the counter with trembling hands. The kettle behind me started to hiss, even though I hadn't turned it on. And that's when it hit me. Not like a crash, but like a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The lies were back, and this time I didn't know if I had the strength to believe them again. The next morning, I laid his clothes out like I used to. A pressed shirt, his favorite tie, the socks with the tiny blue stripes he always wore on important days. He came out of the shower and smiled like we were still who we used to be. "Back to spoiling me?" he said, tugging on his tie. I shrugged, smiling back. Habit. I told myself it was habit. Because what else could I do? The receipt from the hotel still sat where I'd hidden it, under the recipe box in a small white envelope. I hadn't confronted him. I wasn't ready. Not because I was afraid of him, but because I wasn't ready to break the version of him I was still holding on to. The version that had come back home 6 months ago, with tears in his eyes and promises in his mouth. The version that said, "I've changed." The version that looked at me like he meant it. We had been through so much, a separation, the long, bitter silences, a brief affair, his, not mine. He had sworn it ended, sworn he chose me, sworn he wanted to rebuild. And I believed him. Because he was my husband. Because he was the father of our son. Because when you spend 20 years building a life with someone, you don't throw it away over one forgotten receipt, right? That's what I told myself. That's what I clung to. That day, he left early, kissed me twice at the door, once on the cheek, once on the lips. He hadn't done that in a while. And for a moment, I felt it, that flicker of warmth in my chest, that maybe, just maybe, things were real again. I spent the morning cleaning out the upstairs closet. I found the sweater he loved, the one I used to wear on winter nights curled up beside him. I pressed it to my face. It still smelled faintly like him. Or like memory, I wasn't sure anymore. Around noon, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, scrolling through photos on my phone. Us at the beach, him holding our son after his first soccer win, a blurry picture of the 2 of us laughing at some wedding. I couldn't even remember whose. We looked happy. We looked real. I wanted to crawl into that photo and stay there. The mail came late. I gathered the letters out of habit, water bill, credit card offer, something from the bank. I almost tossed that one aside, but something made me pause. It was addressed to both of us, but the return address wasn't familiar. I opened it slowly. Inside, a confirmation of a bank account update. His name listed under primary owner, mine listed nowhere. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. I told myself it was a mistake. He must have forgotten to include me, or the bank had made an error, or it was a temporary account, or I was lying to myself again. But I folded the letter neatly and slid it into the same envelope as the receipt. Still, I said nothing. I needed to believe. I wasn't ready to stop. That night, he brought home flowers. Not roses, he knew I hated those. Daisies, the kind I used to pick from the field near my childhood home. He handed them to me and said, "Just because." I thanked him, arranged them in the tall glass vase we got as a wedding gift. He poured wine, made pasta, told me a story about someone at work spilling coffee all over a client. I laughed at the right parts. I watched his eyes when he told it. Still blue, still warm. But there was something behind them I couldn't reach anymore. Like a curtain had been drawn just far enough to keep me from seeing everything. After dinner, he put his hand on mine. "I'm trying," he said. I looked down at our fingers, interlaced, familiar. "I know," I said softly. And I meant it. Or I wanted to mean it. He kissed my hand, told me I looked beautiful, said I was strong, said he'd never stop trying. When we went to bed, he curled into me like he used to, his head against my shoulder, his hand on my hip. I closed my eyes and tried to pretend it was enough. But my heart was beating too loud, and my mind was replaying every crack I'd been patching over. At 2:12 a.m., I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. He was snoring lightly beside me. I slipped out of bed and tiptoed downstairs. I opened my email and searched our bank's name. 5 new accounts had been created in the last 4 months, all under his name, all using the same address, a P.O. box I didn't recognize. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just saved the documents, printed them quietly, slipped them into the folder. I named it Truth. And then I went back to bed, curled beside him again, like nothing had happened. Because I needed one more day, one more reason to hope, one more reason to believe that love could still survive the worst of things. But hope isn't the same as trust, and love isn't the same as safety. I woke the next morning and watched him get dressed. He kissed me on the forehead again. "You're my everything," he said. I nodded but didn't speak, because if I did, I might ask, and if I asked, I'd have to hear the answer. Instead, I watched him walk away, watched him drive off, and then I sat down and whispered to myself, "I'm not ready to stop loving him, but I'm starting to stop trusting him." He cried. That night, after dinner, after he brought me the daisies and rubbed my back like he used to, he broke down in the kitchen. We had just finished doing the dishes together. He stood behind me, arms around my waist, chin resting on my shoulder. For a moment, I let myself relax. Then I heard the breath catch in his throat. When I turned, there were tears in his eyes. "I don't want to lose you," he said. His voice cracked, and for the first time in months, maybe longer, he looked scared, really scared. Not angry, not fake sorry, just scared. "I messed up," he whispered. "There's nothing I can say to make it right, but I can't lose this. I can't lose you." He was shaking. I stared at him. My heart cracked in too many places at once. He didn't admit anything specifically. No names, no hotel receipt, no lies. But he knew. And somehow, I did too. I didn't press. I didn't demand answers. Because in that moment, I saw the man I married again. Not perfect, not even honest, but vulnerable. And I'd loved him most when he was vulnerable. We didn't talk about the details that night. Instead, he held me like I was oxygen, like I was something sacred. And for a while, I let myself believe maybe I still was. The next morning, he brought me breakfast in bed, pancakes with strawberries, just like we used to make for Sunday mornings when our son was small. We laughed about the time the syrup spilled across the carpet and left a sticky patch for 3 months. For the first time in what felt like forever, I laughed without forcing it. He looked at me, eyes soft. "Let's get away." I blinked. "What?" "Just you and me, a weekend, no phones, no emails, just us, to remember who we were." Something inside me fluttered. Not quite hope, not quite certainty, but it was warm. I said yes. 2 days later, we were in a cabin upstate, just a few hours from home, nestled between pine trees and the quiet hush of nature. It was the same place we'd stayed after our honeymoon 20 years ago. He remembered. That mattered. He brought the same bottle of wine. He made the same cheesy spaghetti. He even played that old Sam Cooke song we danced to in the kitchen when we were 25 and too broke for a real honeymoon. For a moment, it all felt possible again. We walked in the woods. We talked about our son, about how fast he was growing, about maybe taking him on a trip before he started high school. We built a fire. He told me I was beautiful, not in a passing compliment kind of way, but like he meant it, like he was seeing me again. And I let myself lean into that. I didn't ask about the receipt, or the bank letters, or the way he sometimes stared off into space like he was somewhere else entirely. Because I wanted this version. I needed this version. I wanted the memory to become the present. And for a few nights, it did. We made love like we were still young. He touched me like he still knew my skin. He said all the right things, that he was sorry, that he'd never take me for granted again, that I was the only one who ever knew the real him. And I wanted to believe it. I did believe it. Even as something small, something silent, whispered underneath it all. The day we left, he held my hand the whole ride back. When we got home, he unpacked everything. He put our favorite photo, the one of us by the cabin lake, back on the mantle. "I want this to be a new start," he said. "Let's build something better." I nodded. But something inside me hesitated. A week passed. He cooked dinner 3 nights in a row, folded laundry, bought me a new pair of earrings. He told our son he was proud of him, sat through the entire school concert without checking his phone once. He even started going to counseling, said he needed to work on his damage. And every part of me wanted to reward that, to love him more for trying, to forget. But forgetting is not the same as healing. And love doesn't erase what you've seen, especially not when you've seen what betrayal looks like in a man's eyes. Still, I tried, because hope is hard to kill, even when it's bleeding. Then, one morning, I noticed something. His phone never lit up after 9 p.m. He kept it face down on the nightstand. It was nothing, maybe, but it scratched at me, the way a too perfect picture always hides something in the shadows. I didn't check it, I didn't accuse him, but I didn't stop noticing either. Another week passed. One night, I heard him on the porch, talking quietly. I couldn't hear the words, just the rhythm of apology. When I stepped outside, he smiled quickly. "Work call," he said. "Everything okay?" "Just a deadline thing." I nodded. He reached for my hand, pulled me in, kissed my forehead. But it felt late, like a gesture that should have come before the lie. I still slept beside him, still cooked with him, still kissed him good mornings in the mornings. But part of me had stepped back, like standing behind a glass wall, watching it all replay. Waiting, not hoping anymore, just watching. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail, a credit inquiry under my name, from a bank I didn't use. I called. They said a joint account had been requested, with my signature, only I hadn't signed anything. I hung up, sat at the kitchen table, held the letter in both hands, and did not cry, because something in me had gone cold. When he came home that night, he brought me flowers again, this time roses. He forgot I hated roses. We fell into a rhythm again. Dinners together, Sunday walks, quiet mornings with tea and crossword puzzles. He made me laugh more. He kissed me on the shoulder when I wasn't looking. He even joined me at the garden center and didn't complain once. It felt lovely, safe, almost real. But it was too clean, too even, too practiced. That's how I knew something was wrong. He started leaving handwritten notes again, small ones. In the drawer with the spoons, can't stop thinking about last weekend. Next to my pillow, I still choose you. I wanted to believe them. God, I did. But I noticed something in his handwriting. It was rushed, slanted, off. Like he wrote them quickly. Like someone watching a movie of love and mimicking the scenes. It felt like kindness with a script. One night, he made risotto. That used to be my favorite. But he added mushrooms this time. He forgot I'm allergic to mushrooms. I didn't say anything. Just picked them out one by one. He didn't notice. That week, he started locking his car. He never used to. Once, he even let me borrow it when mine was in the shop.
Now, it clicked shut the second he stepped away. And his phone? Always face down, always on silent after 8 o'clock. I wasn't checking it, I wasn't accusing him, but I wasn't pretending anymore either. I noticed he started wearing cologne on weekdays, a scent I didn't recognize, something spicy, new. I asked once lightly, trying something different? He smiled. You noticed? Then walked away. I began listening more than I spoke. I noticed how he paused when he said us, how often he talked about moving forward but never mentioned specifics. I asked him once what our 5-year plan was. He blinked. I don't know. Why? No reason, I said, just thinking. There was a shift in how he touched me too. He kissed me more, held me longer. But sometimes it felt like he was hugging a memory, not me. Like he was trying to convince himself, or compensate. I didn't say it out loud, because I wasn't ready to have it confirmed. Then, one morning, I found one of his socks tucked under the couch cushion, a fancy one, new, not part of any pair I had bought or washed. Where'd you get these? I asked. He looked at them. Birthday gift from a coworker, Greg. I nodded. Greg had died last year. I told myself maybe he forgot, that maybe it was a different Greg, that maybe I heard wrong. But my stomach said otherwise. And now I was listening to my stomach more than his words. He surprised me with a dinner reservation the next weekend. Italian place, soft candlelight, the kind of place you'd take someone when you want them to remember how good you are. He raised his glass and said, "To fresh starts." I clinked gently, watched the flame flicker in his eyes, smiled, even as I folded the napkin tighter in my lap, because something in me had stopped unfolding. We were quiet on the drive home, not awkward, just hollow, like two people playing the roles they were given, hoping the lines would start to feel true. He reached for my hand at the stoplight. I let him, but I didn't squeeze back. That night, he fell asleep first. I watched his chest rise and fall. I used to find that comforting, proof that he was there. Now it felt like I was watching a stranger breathe. The next morning, I made tea. 2 sugars, no lemon. I stirred it in a slow circle, watching the swirl disappear. Then I stood there holding the spoon and whispered to myself, I don't trust this piece. It happened on a Wednesday. Ordinary, unremarkable. The kind of day where you almost believe the lie because the sky is clear and the world feels quiet. I was folding laundry when the landline rang. We barely used it anymore. I picked up out of habit. Hi, this is Andrea from Lambert Realty. Just calling to confirm the show-in tomorrow at 3. Will your husband be there or just you? I blinked. I'm sorry. The showing on Willow Drive, Michael said it was fine to go ahead and schedule. Willow Drive? That was our house. Our house. The one we bought together 19 years ago. The one with the dent in the hallway from where our son rode his tricycle too fast. The one I painted myself, room by room, after he said color made a home feel alive. "I think you have the wrong," I started, then stopped, because something inside me clicked hard. I didn't argue with her. I told her I'd check with him. I hung up, walked to the kitchen like I wasn't shaking. I opened the drawer, pulled out the envelope labeled Truth, added a sticky note, Willow Drive, Lambert Realty, 3 p.m. Thursday. Then I sat at the table and stared at the vase of dead daisies he had bought me weeks ago. I hadn't had the heart to throw them out. Now I couldn't stand the sight of them. That night he came home whistling. He kissed me, told me I looked pretty, asked if I wanted Thai food or sushi. I said Thai. He ordered both. "You deserve options," he smiled. I nodded. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, flipped it over, slid it into his pocket. I didn't ask, just folded my napkin slowly. The next morning, I called Lambert Realty, asked to speak to Andrea again. "I just wanted to confirm the showing on Willow Drive," I said calmly. "We've had a schedule change." "Oh, no problem. We can push it to next week. Tell Michael we're still waiting on those final forms from the buyer's attorney." I paused. "Buyer?" "Yes, the woman who signed last week. Everything looks good on her end."
Signed. Last week. Without me. I thanked her, hung up. Then sat at the edge of the bathtub and stared at the grout between the tiles. Signed. He had sold the house. Our house. Without me. That night, I didn't cook. I didn't wait for him. I drove to the grocery store, parked in the back corner, and just sat in the car. My fingers drummed the steering wheel like I was playing a lullaby for a ghost. Then I texted him. "Running errands, don't wait up." He replied instantly. "All good, babe. Love you." Babe. I stared at the word. He hadn't called me that in years, until recently. It was like watching someone wear your husband's skin and hope you wouldn't notice the seams. I got home around 10. He was asleep, or pretending to be. I crawled into bed beside him. His arm reached for me, but I faced the wall. And in my mind, I started building a map of lies, of transactions, of timelines that no longer added up. The next day, I opened the laptop, logged into the account we used to share. The passwords still worked. There were emails from a law office. One caught my eye. Subject: property transfer, final. I opened it. And there it was. His name on every line. My name? Nowhere. He'd already signed. She had too. The buyer. Same name as the initial on the hotel receipt. B. Sanders. My stomach turned. Not from shock, not anymore, but from confirmation. He didn't just betray me. He erased me. Systematically. Quietly. Like a man erasing pencil lines from a sketch he no longer wanted. I didn't confront him that night. I made pasta. He offered to clean the dishes. I watched him hum while rinsing the plates. Like everything was fine. Like we were still fine. He turned to me. "You've been quiet lately." I nodded. Just tired. "Well," he said, drying his hands, "we're almost through it. I feel it. We're getting back to us." I smiled. But in my head, I heard it clearly. There is no us. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to him breathe. Every rise and fall of his chest was a lie. A well-rehearsed lie I had lived inside for too long. At 4:22 a.m., I got out of bed and went downstairs. Sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, pulled up the email again, the one with the contract. The house was already sold. The paperwork was done. But that wasn't all. There was a second email from a name I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "She signed. Let me know when we're moving in." I opened it. The message was short, too short. I still don't trust her. Hope she doesn't pull anything. Can't wait to finally start our life without sneaking around. Love you. Attached was a PDF, a floor plan, my kitchen, my bedroom. But they weren't mine anymore, because they'd made a plan to live it without me. I read the message 4 times. My hand didn't tremble. My eyes didn't water. Something in me had gone still. Frozen, maybe. Or forged. Upstairs, he shifted in bed. I closed the laptop, stood in the dark kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. I didn't drink it, just held it. Like it was the last thing tethering me to the idea that this could still be saved. That morning, he made me toast, burnt it, laughed and kissed my cheek. I'm still not used to this toaster. We'd had it for 6 years. I nodded, smiled back. He left for work. The moment the door closed, I moved. Not in panic. Not in rage. But like someone stepping into her own skin for the first time in months. I pulled out the envelope marked Truth. I added the emails, the contract, the PDF. I opened the safe behind the closet shelf, took out the folder labeled Joint Assets. They weren't joint anymore. Not really. I started calling, quietly, calmly. The lawyer I used for the will after my father died. My cousin who worked in real estate. The bank manager who once helped me recover a stolen credit card. I didn't cry during any of the calls. I didn't raise my voice. I asked direct questions. I wrote down answers. And for the first time in a long time, I felt steady. That night, he brought home Chinese food, called me sweetheart twice, talked about maybe getting a puppy, said we could use some new energy in the house. I smiled, because soon he wouldn't be in this house. After dinner, I went to our son's room. He was away for the week, a school trip upstate. I sat on the edge of his bed, ran my fingers along the bookshelf we built together. He loved that shelf. We'd painted it bright blue. It didn't match anything, but he said it felt happy. I remember Michael laughed and said, "That's the ugliest shelf I've ever seen." I remember the look on our son's face, like joy had been scolded. I made a decision that night, not out of revenge, not out of fury, but because I finally understood. He never thought I'd leave. He thought he'd win quietly, erase me gently, like a woman too polite to fight. But I wasn't erased. I was watching. I was remembering. I was ready. The next morning, I stood at the window while he packed his briefcase. "Meeting at 10, he said. Might run late tonight." I nodded. "Want me to bring anything back?" I turned, looked him in the eyes. "Clarity," I said. He laughed. "Clarity? What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled. "Just think about it." Then I kissed his cheek, watched him drive away,
And then I went to my lawyer's office. I smiled more that week than I had in months, poured his coffee exactly the way he liked, laughed at his jokes, kissed him at the door. I even ironed his shirts, pressed the collars just right, let him think I was coming back to him. Let him believe the show, because it was easier that way, because I needed him to relax, to stop watching me, so I could watch him. Every night I made dinner like nothing had changed. Meatloaf on Tuesday, shrimp pasta on Thursday. I lit candles again, put on soft music, turned down the lights. He told me it felt like us again. I said, I think we're getting there. What I meant was, I'm almost done pretending. He left his laptop open once while he showered. Normally he took it into the bathroom. Not that day. I didn't touch anything, just glanced. Just enough to see the folder, Plan B. I took a photo, added it to the folder in my locked drawer, Final. I got better at it, smiling while storing evidence, laughing while listening. He told me he was proud of me, said he could feel the shift. I knew you'd come around, he whispered one night, holding me close. I didn't answer, because if I had, I might have said, I came around to the truth, not to you. That weekend, we visited his parents. They looked at me the same way they always had, polite, cautious, slightly dismissive. His mother said, "You look like you're doing better, less tired." I smiled. "Oh, I'm not tired anymore." She blinked, didn't ask more. At night, he slept easily, too easily. He snored beside me while I stared at the ceiling, counting backward from 100, steadying my breath. One night, he whispered in his sleep, B. One letter, that's all. But I heard it like a gunshot in a chapel. In the morning, I started jogging again, told him I wanted to feel strong. He said that was sexy. I ran further each day, not to escape, to train, to hold my body again, to feel what control tasted like on my tongue. I changed my passwords, opened a new account, transferred small amounts of money, quietly, carefully. I checked the mailbox before he got home, started storing copies of important papers at my sister's house, told her nothing, just that I needed a little space for old files. She didn't ask. She'd asked before. I hadn't answered. I practiced my voice in the mirror, the one I'd use in court, the one that didn't shake, didn't beg, didn't flinch, just stated facts. He brought home a necklace one night, silver, delicate, cheap. Said it reminded him of the first one he ever gave me. It didn't. I wore it anyway, watched him beam. He thought I was his again. He thought he'd won, but he was celebrating too early. I made one final spreadsheet, printed copies, stored a backup on an encrypted USB in the bottom of my makeup drawer. Names, dates, transactions, evidence. I labeled it Freedom. Then I bought a dress, dark green, soft fabric, strong shoulders, the one I'd wear the day I took everything back. He kissed me that night and said, "You feel like home again." And I smiled, because I finally did, but not the way he thought. I didn't feel like his home. I felt like mine, and that made all the difference. It began with a letter. Not dramatic, no threats, just one line at the top. Notice of intent to separate. I mailed it from a box 2 towns over. He wouldn't see it coming, because I'd trained him not to. The next morning, I made eggs, over easy the way he liked, set his coffee just right, kissed him on the cheek. He smiled like a man who believed he still had the upper hand. "I might be late tonight," he said. "Client dinner." I nodded. "Take your time." What I meant was, take all the time you want. The locks will be changed tomorrow. He left. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened the binder labeled Final. Called the lawyer. The voice on the other end was calm, precise. Ready to file? Yes. Any objections if we serve him at work? I paused, then said, no objections. By noon, the documents were in motion. I closed the laptop, stared out the window, and for the first time in what felt like years, I breathed without bracing for pain. At 3:17 p.m., I called the bank, froze the joint account, transferred my name off the secondary card he didn't know I still monitored, the account he used for the hotel, the gifts, the dinners he didn't eat with me. At 4:45 p.m., I walked into the courthouse, filed a restraining order on the property title. He wouldn't be able to sell again, not without my name. That evening, he came home humming, thigh takeout again. He was trying too hard. I figured you'd be too tired to cook. I smiled. You figured right. We ate in silence. He talked about a new project, said he might be asked to lead. I nodded. Inside, I was folding the contract into my court folder. After dinner, he poured wine. To second chances, he said. I raised my glass. To clarity. The next morning, the sheriff served him the papers, at work. My lawyer had timed it well. No warning. No time to twist it. He came home late, silent. I was sitting in the living room, fire lit, legs crossed. He stood in the doorway like he didn't recognize the room, or me. Why, he said. Why now? I tilted my head. You told me to trust me. I was trying to fix things. You were trying to keep both. He flinched. I stood, walked past him. He didn't follow. He slept on the couch that night. I heard him pacing at 2 a.m. I didn't go down, didn't check on him, didn't comfort him. That job was over. In the morning, he tried again. I was confused. I didn't mean to hurt you. I looked him in the eye. I used to believe that mattered, that intention could undo impact. It doesn't. He swallowed hard. You don't have to do this. I already did. Then I handed him a folder. Inside, a list of what was mine, what wasn't, and what I knew. He flipped through it, quiet. He knew better than to argue. There was too much, too detailed, too final. By Friday, he'd moved into a hotel, the one he once took her to. Funny how things come full circle. The neighbors asked if everything was okay. I smiled. Better than okay. The courtroom smelled like dust and old varnish, rows of wooden benches, a clock ticking too loud, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above. I sat at the end of the second row with my lawyer beside me, calm in a charcoal suit. My folder was on my lap, the one labeled Freedom. Michael hadn't looked at me
since walking in. He sat across the aisle, jaw tight, fingers clenched. His new lawyer whispered something into his ear. He nodded once, but never turned around. I used to know his face like my own palm. Now, it looked like something I'd once seen in a newspaper, familiar, but far away. The judge walked in. Everyone rose. Case number 1729 was called. Henley v. Henley. And just like that, the performance began. Only this time, I wasn't acting. Michael's lawyer started soft. She never expressed concern before. There was no indication she was unhappy. In fact, they had just returned from a trip together. I could hear the angle already. I was the irrational one, the vengeful wife, emotional, unstable, impossible to please. Classic. I didn't react. Not once. Then it was our turn. My lawyer stood, slow and steady. No dramatic statements, Your Honor. We have documents, dates, transfers of funds, undisclosed accounts, property sales without consent. The judge raised an eyebrow. Go on? We started with the house. A trust transfer signed without me. Real estate contracts sent to buyers while I was still watering the front lawn like everything was fine. Then the money trail. Small accounts opened under Michael's name only. Transactions that increased over months, enough to be intentional, not careless. Then the emails. Printed, bound,
time-stamped. Michael's lawyer tried to object. "This is circumstantial," my lawyer cut in, "until the recipient confirms," which she has. He handed over a notarized statement from B. Sanders, the other woman. She had confessed. Not to protect me. I didn't need protection anymore. She confessed because he promised her the house, promised her my life, but left her out of the legal paperwork. She realized too late that if he could do it to me, he'd do it to her. And she turned. The room went still. Michael's face flushed deep red. Still, he didn't look at me. Then the judge asked the one question I had waited months to hear. "Mrs. Henley, do you wish to speak?" I stood, walked to the front. The floorboards creaked softly under my heels. I didn't bring a written statement. I didn't need one. I'm not here to punish him," I said. My voice was calm, firm. "I'm not even here to win anything." I looked directly at the judge, not at Michael, not even at the audience in the back row who were now whispering. "I'm here to reclaim what I forgot was mine. My name, my safety, my ability to sleep without fear, the right to not be used." The judge nodded. "Continue?" I took a breath. When someone betrays you quietly, every day feels like gaslight, like you're erasing yourself just to keep the peace. I did that for a long time. My voice didn't waver. "I'm not angry anymore. I'm not devastated. I'm done." Silence. Heavy. Real. The judge asked no more. She just said, "Thank you, Mrs. Henley." I turned and walked back to my seat. Michael still hadn't moved. He looked like a man whose mask had fallen but couldn't find where it landed. The rest moved fast. The court granted the separation. Assets frozen, then divided based on updated documentation. The house returned to my name. The joint accounts closed. My lawyer handed me the final packet. I held it in my lap, didn't flip through it. I didn't need to see every page. I already knew how it ended. Outside, the wind had picked up. Michael walked past me on the courthouse steps, didn't say a word, didn't look back, just got into a black car and drove away. I watched it until it disappeared into the traffic. My sister stood next to me. She hadn't said much all day, just held my hand through the hearing. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. But the truth? I was more than okay. I was clear. That night, I took off my wedding ring. Not with ceremony, not with anger, just gently, like setting something down that had become too heavy to wear. I placed it in a box labeled "Before" and left it there. I didn't pack much when I left. 3 suitcases, 2 boxes, a battered jewelry box I'd kept since college. That was all I brought with me when I closed the door to the life we built, or the one I thought we had. I didn't look back. Not once. I rented a house on the edge of a small town, with no streetlights, just trees
And gravel and birds that started singing too early. The first morning I woke there, I made coffee and forgot I didn't have a spoon. I stirred it with the end of a pen. I laughed. Alone, but not lonely. Just adjusting. I didn't post about it. Didn't tell anyone beyond the people who absolutely needed to know. I needed this to be mine. Mine in a way nothing had been in a long time. The house was quiet. An old one-story cottage with creaky floorboards and a drafty window in the bedroom. It had no central heating, a cracked porch step, and a smell like cedar and old paper. It was perfect, because it didn't ask anything of me. I slept on a mattress on the floor for the first week, ordered a desk from a local thrift shop, wrote to-do lists in longhand. No pressure, no deadlines. If I wanted to lie in bed all morning, I did. If I wanted to eat cereal for dinner, I did. There were no roles to play.
No performances. Just breath and space, and a woman learning how to fill both again. I started running again, slowly, around the edge of the property at first, just to get the rhythm back in my legs. I'd forgotten how my body felt when it wasn't being watched, not judged, not touched, not used. Just mine. The garden was a mess when I arrived. Overgrown ivy, soil packed hard as brick. I didn't know much about planting, but I learned. Bought gloves, dug slowly, planted rosemary, mint, lavender, the kind of plants that take root without needing much care. Resilient things, like me. I burned old papers one night, not out of anger, just to mark a line in time, a boundary. I watched the edges curl and disappear, bank statements, old love notes, a dinner receipt from our reconciliation trip. Ash settled soft at the bottom of the tin pan, and it was done. I read books again, real ones, not articles about trust recovery or trauma bonding. Novels, poetry, the kind that left you wrecked or reassembled in the span of a paragraph. I underlined lines like prayers, wrote my own too. Some nights I sat by the window with a glass of wine and a notebook in my lap, wrote pages I didn't reread, just let them go. Friends started calling again. I answered when I could, when I wanted. Sometimes I didn't, and that was okay too. My son visited after the first month. He didn't say much, teenagers rarely do, but when he walked in, he looked around and said, "This feels like you." That meant everything. I showed him the rosemary, let him pick mint for his tea. We played cards, watched a movie I used to love. When he left, he hugged me tighter than usual. "I'm proud of you, Mom." I smiled. Me too. Some nights I still dreamt about Michael. Not about the betrayal, just the quiet. The years I spent shrinking. I'd wake up with my hand clenched, nails in my palm. But I didn't cry. Just opened the window, let the air in, and reminded myself, that version of me is gone. I made new routines. Grocery runs on Tuesdays, laundry on Sundays, morning tea instead of coffee. Little changes, sacred shifts. I wore soft clothes, big sweaters, no makeup, hair loose. No one to impress, nothing to hide. One day I painted again. Not well, not seriously. Just big brush strokes across cheap canvas. Color with no purpose, messy joy. I hung the painting in the hallway. Every time I passed it, I smiled. Because it wasn't perfect, and neither was I. But we both existed. That was enough. I started writing about what happened. Not for a book, not for revenge. Just to get it out of my body, to stop it from echoing inside. I went back to therapy, once a week, small steps. We didn't talk about him much. We talked about me. Who I was before, who I'm becoming now. What I want, what I no longer accept. Peace didn't come all at once. It was slow, like fog rolling and gravel and birds that started singing too early. The first morning I woke there, I made coffee and forgot I didn't have a spoon. I stirred it with the end of a pen. I laughed. Alone, but not lonely. Just adjusting. I didn't post about it. Didn't tell anyone beyond the people who absolutely needed to know. I needed this to be mine. Mine in a way nothing had been in a long time. The house was quiet. An old one-story cottage with creaky floorboards and a drafty window in the bedroom. It had no central heating, a cracked porch step, and a smell like cedar and old paper. It was perfect, because it didn't ask anything of me. I slept on a mattress on the floor for the first week, ordered a desk from a local thrift shop, wrote to-do lists in longhand. No pressure, no deadlines. If I wanted to lie in bed all morning, I did. If I wanted to eat cereal for dinner, I did. There were no roles to play, no performances, just breath and space, and a woman learning how to fill both again. I started running again, slowly, around the edge of the property at first, just to get the rhythm back in my legs. I'd forgotten how my body felt when it wasn't being watched, not judged, not touched, not used. Just mine. The garden was a mess when I arrived. Overgrown ivy, soil packed hard as brick. I didn't know much about planting, but I learned. Bought gloves, dug slowly, planted rosemary, mint, lavender, the kind of plants that take root without needing much care. Resilient things, like me. I burned old papers one night, not out of anger, just to mark a line in time, a boundary. I watched the edges curl and disappear, bank statements, old love notes, a dinner receipt from our reconciliation trip. Ash settled soft at the bottom of the tin pan, and it was done. I read books again, real ones, not articles about trust recovery or trauma bonding. Novels, poetry, the kind that left you wrecked or reassembled in the span of a paragraph. I underlined lines like prayers, wrote my own too. Some nights I sat by the window with a glass of wine and a notebook in my lap, wrote pages I didn't reread, just let them go. Friends started calling again. I answered when I could, when I wanted. Sometimes I didn't, and that was okay too. My son visited after the first month. He didn't say much, teenagers rarely do, but when he walked in, he looked around and said, "This feels like you." That meant everything. I showed him the rosemary, let him pick mint for his tea. We played cards, watched a movie I used to love. When he left, he hugged me tighter than usual. "I'm proud of you, Mom." I smiled. Me too. Some nights I still dreamt about Michael. Not about the betrayal, just the quiet. The years I spent shrinking. I'd wake up with my hand clenched, nails in my palm. But I didn't cry. Just opened the window, let the air in, and reminded myself, that version of me is gone. I made new routines. Grocery runs on Tuesdays, laundry on Sundays, morning tea instead of coffee. Little changes, sacred shifts. I wore soft clothes, big sweaters, no makeup, hair loose, no one to impress, nothing to hide. One day I painted again. Not well, not seriously. Just big brush strokes across cheap canvas, color with no purpose, messy joy. I hung the painting in the hallway. Every time I passed it, I smiled. Because it wasn't perfect, and neither was I. But we both existed. That was enough. I started writing about what happened, not for a book, not for revenge, just to get it out of my body, to stop it from echoing inside. I went back to therapy, once a week, small steps. We didn't talk about him much. We talked about me. Who I was before, who I'm becoming now, what I want, what I no longer accept. Peace didn't come all at once. It was slow, like fog rolling back, inch by inch. But one morning, I realized I hadn't thought about him in days, not even in passing. He no longer lived in the corners of my mind. And that silence,
didn't feel like absence anymore. It felt like freedom. I didn't want revenge. Not really. I wanted space. Silence. A room that only echoed my own breath. I got that, eventually. A little house on the edge of town. Old wood floors, soft light in the mornings, a garden where nothing grew perfectly, but everything tried. That was enough. People asked what happened. I didn't always answer. Some stories don't need retelling. Some pain doesn't need performing. But when I was ready, I wrote it down. Not for pity, not to shame him, just to name it. To name what was taken, and more importantly, what I reclaimed. I published it quietly, a short piece on a blog no one read until they did. Women emailed me, mothers, wives, daughters, strangers who saw their own outlines in my words. They thanked me for saying it out loud. I didn't know how much I needed to be thanked until I read those messages. Some nights, I still remember the way he smiled when he lied, how soft he made the hurt feel, how easy it was to doubt myself instead of him. But I don't stay in that memory long. I've learned the difference between remembering and reliving. I tell this story now with no tremble in my voice, because I've stopped trying to make it sound better than it was. He didn't love me. He loved what I gave him. He loved being believed. And I gave him that. Until I didn't. I walk differently now. Not faster, not louder, just rooted. Like a woman who knows her own name again. Like someone who has nothing left to hide and no reason to shrink. This is not a victory speech. It's a burial. A quiet one. I'm not here to resurrect anything. I'm here to say, it ended, and I survived it. My name is Claire Henley. I was a good wife, a patient woman, a quiet storm. He mistook that quiet for weakness, and I let him, until I didn't.